The alarm screamed through Aegis Prime like a wounded animal, sharp and endless, shaking the walls and the people inside as red lights flooded every hallway and the deep thud of distant impacts rolled through the massive orbital fortress. And Lieutenant Mara Vance stood frozen near the intake corridor, clutching a thin data slate with both hands as if it might break apart. Her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat while the words on the screen burned into her mind. Assignment confirmed. Monster Division. A sentence that made no sense no matter how many times she read it. Because Mara was not a soldier meant for monsters or glory or last stands. She was a logistics officer trained to count fuel cells, manage supply routes, and fix errors in long columns of numbers. And she whispered to herself that this had to be wrong, that someone somewhere had typed one wrong code. But another explosion rocked the station and threw her against the cold metal wall, pain flaring in her shoulder as the fortress shields groaned under pressure, and over the intercom a calm but urgent voice announced that the Krell Dominion fleet had arrived, the name alone sending a cold fear through every human heart. Because the Krell were not just conquerors but destroyers, their ships living beasts grown for war, their soldiers bred only to kill. And wherever they went, stars went dark and civilizations vanished, and humanity had been losing to them for 7 long years, retreating system by system, hoping to slow the inevitable. And now the Krell were here, tearing at one of humanity's last strongholds. And as crew members ran past her with weapons and sealed helmets, the intercom barked again that all Monster Division personnel were to report to Hangar Black immediately, and Mara stared at her slate one last time before forcing her legs to move, fear screaming inside her as she ran through shaking corridors filled with smoke and flashing lights, her breath short and uneven, her mind racing with questions she had no time to answer. Until she reached Hangar Black and felt the air change the moment the heavy doors slid open. The space darker and heavier than any hangar she had seen before, filled with massive scarred ships that looked more like tools of survival than machines of beauty. Their hulls patched and burned, built for endurance rather than pride. And standing among them were the soldiers of the Monster Division. Men and women with hard eyes and quiet movements. Bodies marked by old wounds and replaced limbs. People who carried themselves like they had already faced death and decided not to care anymore. And Mara felt small among them, painfully out of place in her clean uniform. Until a towering man with a metal jaw glanced down at her and asked if she was lost. And when she stammered that she thought she had been assigned here by mistake, he gave a short, humorless laugh and told her that everyone in the Monster Division was a mistake. And before she could respond, the hangar lights dimmed and a massive tactical display flared to life above them, showing the space outside Aegis Prime where the Krell fleet surrounded the fortress like a swarm of dark predators. Hundreds of living warships drifting with terrible patience while smaller human fleets burned and broke apart under their fire. And the sight stole the breath from Mara's lungs as she realized just how hopeless the situation was. And then a woman stepped forward, older, scarred, calm in a way that only came from surviving too many battles, and introduced herself as Commander Rhea Holt. Her voice steady as she welcomed them to the Monster Division and explained that if they were here it meant someone higher up either believed they mattered or had simply run out of better options. And when Holt's sharp eyes settled on Mara and asked what her skill was, Mara hesitated, shame and fear twisting inside her as she admitted that she moved supplies, solved problems, and noticed patterns, expecting dismissal or laughter. But instead the fortress shook again as enemy fire slammed into the shields, and Commander Holt nodded slowly, saying that problem solvers were exactly what they needed, because the Krell would breach the station soon and there was no room for wasted minds. And in that moment, standing among broken ships and dangerous soldiers while the enemy closed in from all sides, Mara felt the weight of the war settle onto her shoulders, understanding that a single clerical error had dragged her out of a safe desk and into the heart of humanity's darkest fight. And as the monster division prepared to launch into battle instead of fleeing like the rest of the fleet, Mara realized with a mix of terror and strange resolve that she was no longer just watching the war from behind a screen. She was inside it now, and whether she survived or not, nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The monster division did not retreat, and as the Krell boarding ships tore through the weakened shields of Aegis Prime, Human Command ordered civilian transports to flee and regular forces to pull back, leaving only the division to face the full fury of the enemy. And Mara Vance, still trembling from her sudden assignment, found herself working alongside experienced officers she barely understood, her hands flying over unfamiliar controls as her mind tried to make sense of the data flowing across the screens while the fortress shook and alarm screamed. But amidst the chaos, she noticed a pattern that no one else seemed to see. The Krell ships were organized in concentric layers, protecting their central carriers at all costs. And Mara shouted her observation to Commander Holt, who listened and finished her thought, recognizing that if the humans could break through the inner ring, the Krell would panic because the carriers held their breeding cores, irreplaceable assets for the enemy fleet. And Holt's nod was brief but approving as she gave the order to target that weak point. And suddenly Mara realized that her mundane skills in pattern recognition and logistics had become strategic, weapons in a war she had never imagined fighting. And the monster division launched their assault with a ferocity that defied the scale of the Krell fleet. Their ships smaller and uglier than the enemy, but faster and more maneuverable, cutting through plasma blasts and swerving past razor-sharp tendrils of alien energy. While Mara gripped her harness aboard the grim horizon, her stomach churning as explosions tore through space, red flashes lighting the void as enemy ships burned and disintegrated, and when a massive Krell warbeast latched onto their hull, shrieking with multiple eyes and mandibles, Mara screamed along with the crew, adrenaline and fear making her muscles strain as soldiers rushed to engage the creature, fighting with brutal precision, using gravity shifts, explosives, and even their own bodies to subdue the alien threat. And she watched in awe and horror as one soldier hurled the creature into an airlock, venting both it and himself into space without hesitation. And the taste of fear mixed with the thrill of survival as the monster division continued their onslaught, systematically dismantling the Krell inner defenses, while Mara's mind raced to keep up with the tactical shifts, noticing patterns in enemy movement and advising on energy allocations for shields and weapons, the chaos of battle somehow becoming a canvas for her problem-solving mind. And as the human ships pressed the attack, the Krell carriers began to withdraw, their formations breaking as the loss of their inner ring destabilized them, and Mara realized that the strategy had worked. The enemy was scared, for the first time vulnerable, and Commander Holt gave the order for a full push, sending all remaining human ships into the heart of the enemy fleet in a desperate, precise strike aimed at destroying the carriers before they could recover, while the monster division executed maneuvers that balanced risk and sacrifice with exacting calculation, losing ships in brilliant flashes of light as reactors exploded and crews fought to survive, the screams and commands blending into a symphony of chaos and courage, and Mara felt every vibration of the hull, every alert on her console, every explosion in the void, until the largest Krell flagship loomed ahead, black and massive, its gravity cannon humming with deadly potential, a weapon that could erase human fleets and crush Aegis Prime in a single shot. And Mara's heart sank, knowing that everything they had fought for could end in an instant. While Commander Holt's eyes met hers and asked if she had a solution, and Mara, shaking and exhausted, calculated the risks, and realized that if they overloaded the flagship's energy field while it drew from its escort ships, they could destroy it, but it would mean near certain death for their own people. And she stated this calmly, her voice trembling. And Holt nodded with grim determination, giving the Monster Division the order to prepare for the final engagement. And as Mara braced herself in the cockpit of Grim Horizon, feeling the weight of humanity's survival on her shoulders, she closed her eyes for a brief second to steel her mind, knowing that fear could not guide her actions, only focus and resolve, and then she opened her eyes. Adrenaline surging as every ship in the division moved as one, executing the plan she had helped devise, human ingenuity and courage clashing against alien strength in a spectacle of fire, light, and determination. And as the battle raged, Mara felt an unfamiliar but powerful sense of purpose, realizing that in the Monster Division, among those who had been considered mistakes, humanity's resilience and cleverness could shine brighter than any fleet of warships, and that this moment, terrifying and chaotic, could define not only her life but the fate of countless worlds across the galaxy, because they were humanity's last line and they refused to break, proving that even against impossible odds, humans would fight, adapt, and survive. The final charge against the Krell flagship was pure chaos, and Mara Vance felt every ounce of fear, determination, and adrenaline at once as human ships of the Monster Division hurled themselves into the heart of the enemy formation, knowing that most would be destroyed in the attempt, but trusting that their sacrifice could break the war machine before it crushed humanity completely, and the flagship's gravity field twisted and bent space itself, pulling ships apart with invisible hands while tendrils of alien energy lashed out, tearing metal and flesh alike. And Mara gripped the controls of Grim Horizon, her knuckles white, her heart hammering as alarms screamed and hull integrity warnings flashed across her console, while around her, soldiers and officers fought desperately, boarding Krell vessels, setting explosives, and venting sections into the void to slow the flagship's advance. And in the midst of the swirling madness, Mara remembered the pattern she had seen before. The flagship's cannon needed time to charge, and it drew energy from its escort ships, meaning that if they could overload the field at the right moment, the weapon would backfire and the enemy would collapse. And she shouted her calculation to Commander Holt, who immediately gave the order to synchronize every ship in the division for a single, coordinated strike, knowing it was the only chance for victory. And as the plan unfolded, Mara watched human ingenuity shine in ways that the Krell could never anticipate. Smaller ships darting through the gravity distortions to deliver targeted strikes, boarding teams moving like shadows, explosives detonating in perfect timing, and the monstrous flagship screeching with energy feedback as it strained against the human assault, tearing apart escorts and losing coherence with every pulse. While Mara's body ached from the stress and the vibrations of her own ship, sweat and blood streaking her face, and yet she did not hesitate, knowing that the lives of millions depended on her focus and quick thinking, as the Monster Division executed maneuvers that were reckless, brilliant, and terrifying all at once, crashing into the flagship in waves of human determination that no alien calculation could predict, while ships exploded around her, debris spinning in every direction. And yet the division pressed on, refusing to break, refusing to retreat, until finally Mara saw the moment to act, the exact timing for the energy overload, and she initiated it, sending a pulse through the flagship systems, causing the massive weapon to backfire in a blinding flash that lit up the void like a miniature sun. And the shockwave radiated outward, tearing through the Krell fleet, disintegrating warships, rupturing hulls, and sending the remaining enemy forces scattering into dark space. Leaderless and broken, and for the first time in 7 years, humanity could breathe, Even as Grim Horizon drifted crippled, systems failing, and Mara slumped in her seat. Shaking from exhaustion, relief, and disbelief, the battle over, but the cost clear in the silence between explosions, and Commander Holt came to her side, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. Her eyes filled with pride and sorrow, saying that Mara had saved millions because someone above had filed the wrong form. And Mara realized that a clerical error had thrown her into a storm of destruction. Yet in that storm, her skills, courage, and human determination had changed the course of the war, and weeks later, as news spread across human space that the Krell had been wounded for the first time, systems rising again and fleets regrouping, Mara declined promotions and medals, choosing instead to remain with the Monster Division because she understood now that humans were not the strongest, fastest, or most advanced species, but when faced with impossible odds, when pushed to the brink of extinction, humans adapted, endured, and fought back with ingenuity, bravery, and relentless spirit, and somewhere in the dark reaches of space, the Krell would remember that lesson forever, that a single human, thrown into the wrong place by a mistake, could embody the indomitable will of an entire species, and that humans could never be underestimated, because even in chaos, even in fear, even in the face of annihilation, they would rise, they would fight, and they would survive, leaving a legacy of courage and resilience that would echo across the stars for generations. And Mara, exhausted, scarred, and forever changed, knew that she had been part of something far greater than herself, a moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy, a testament to the strength, cunning, and unbreakable spirit that made humans more than survivors, they made history.